From time immemorial, people have earned their place in history by demonstrating extraordinary abilities and making exceptional accomplishments in the fields of science and arts. However, others have also earned their place in history by using their ingenuity to destroy human society. In today's episode, we narrate the life and accomplishments of Paul Carbone, a criminal mastermind who revolutionized prostitution in France, Spain, Egypt, Argentina, and many other countries during the first half of the 20th century. Carbone was born Paul Bonaventure Carbone in February 1894 on the island of Corsica, France. He was the oldest of 3 children. Shortly after his birth, his family moved to the impoverished Parnier neighborhood in Marseille, France. Like other children from a less privileged background, Carbone struggled to meet school needs, but still proved to be a brilliant pupil. Unfortunately, his father died when he was 12. He had to drop out of school to support his mother and 2 younger brothers. Carbone worked as a shoeshine boy, did garbage pickup, and took any jobs that he could find to bring money to the family. The money he made from the menial jobs was barely enough for them to eat, and as his siblings grew older, Carbone realized he had to make desperate moves to address his family's financial situation and give his life a meaning. While on the streets, Carbone had learned about the city of Alexandria, its beautiful women, cultural heritage, and the limitless opportunities that its thriving economy had to offer. At age 15, Carbone moved to Alexandria, Egypt. Thanks to his life experience on the streets, it didn't take long for him to understand the city's underworld, especially the operations of its major prostitution rings. Carbone started as a street pimp, negotiating clients for individual prostitutes in return for a percentage of their earnings. His targets were not only professional prostitutes. He was also able to sweet-talk loose married women who were going through boring, abusive, or unfulfilling marriages and loan them out to clients willing to pay good money. Through a transparent revenue share agreement, Carbone was able to maintain a long-term cordial relationship with the women. His ledgers had almost 1,000 names of free women, their physical characteristics, and how he could get in touch with them. He was contracted by the city's most prominent brothel keepers to furnish them with a fresh supply of girls. If a brothel keeper didn't treat any of Carbone's girls well, he wasn't getting any new supplies. As such, some girls would not deal with a client or brothel keeper directly. Carbone had to be the middleman. Within 3 years of his arrival in Alexandria, he had become an essential player in the city's prostitution market. However, this sudden success didn't sit well with the Egyptian pimps who had been operating in the city for years before him. In 1913, Carbone, aged 19, was kidnapped by 3 Egyptian pimps who buried him up to his neck in the sand in the desert and was abandoned to die. 3 days later, while the pimps were drinking in a brothel and boasting about what they had done, another pimp, Francois Spirito, overheard them. Spirito rushed to the place and rescued Carbone. Carbone and Spirito struck up a lifelong friendship. They immediately started a pimping network that brought women from Paris to work in Egyptian brothels. At that time, Caucasian women were the most sought-after sex workers in Egypt and other Arab countries. In so doing, not only was Carbone dominating the market in terms of numbers, but he also had the most prized products. With the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, Carbone was enlisted in the French Foreign Legion in Algeria, North Africa, known as the Bat d'Af. There he noticed the beauty of Algerian women and created acquaintances in the Algerian prostitution underworld. Immediately after he was discharged from service in 1918, Carbone and Spirito started a network that brought Algerian and Jewish women to work in brothels in France. This changed the dynamics of the French pimping underworld, as Arab and Jewish prostitutes were not very common in France at the time. First, they supplied the brothels in Marseille, and later extended to Paris, Lyon, and other metropolitan cities. Carbone's French clients were not only brothel keepers, but also members of the high society, such as Simon Saviani, a French businessman and politician who served as the mayor of Marseille, and Gian Chiappi, who was the director of the French National Police. The Carbone-Spirito duo gained enormous influence in the Marseille underworld and were the most successful pimps that the country had ever known. In the late 1920s, they diversified into white slavery, protection rackets, and drug trafficking. They set up a refinery in Bandol, a small municipality near Marseille, to process raw opium from Egypt, Turkey, and Indochina into heroin. The heroin was supplied to French aristocrats and members of the American mafia, with most of the American shipments sent to Lucky Luciano in New York. This heroin operation popularly became known as the French Connection, and was the principal source of heroin supply in the USA from the 1920s to the 1960s. Using the excess money realized from drug trafficking, Carbone and Spirito opened their own chain of brothels, with over 25 whorehouses in Marseille alone, not counting those in Paris, Lyon, and other major French cities. Over time, rival French pimps created similar networks that brought Arab women to work in brothels in France, but Carbone and Spirito were always a step ahead. They made a trip to Peru, where they procured 20 young women and started a local pimping operation. As their acquaintances grew in Peru, they began supplying their brothels back home with Latin American women, a very new concept in the French prostitution market. To accommodate his VIP customers, Carbone also created upscale brothels. These were grand houses with luxury suites, elegantly furnished interiors, and oil paintings. This was exclusive to wealthy men who used the facilities as a gentleman's club, where they made business and political connections, met with associates, had exquisite dinners with choice wine and champagne, and had sex with alluringly beautiful women. The initiative of upscale brothels introduced Carbone to the French aristocracy and cemented his relationship with political elites like Simon Sabiani, the mayor of Marseille, and Gian Chiappi, the director of the French National Police. While in Latin America, Carbone and Spirito extended their prostitution networks to Argentina and Spain. Their operations flourished until the outbreak of the Second World War. During the Second World War, France was occupied by the German forces under the Nazi regime. Carbone joined the French auxiliary forces, which collaborated with the Germans in France and started what is known as the mobile military brothels. These brothels were attached to the army as an auxiliary unit on long-term deployment, supplying sex services to German soldiers fighting at the front lines and to those stationed in isolated garrisons. These services were highly valued to the extent that Carbone was awarded a Medal of Honor for his bravery and wartime contributions even before the end of the war. On December 16, 1943, while on a mission to supply girls to a German regiment, Carbone was involved in a ghastly train accident that claimed the lives of many German soldiers. The train was sabotaged by a French resistance movement that fought against the Nazi German occupation of France. Carbone had his legs crushed and one severed at the knee. He sang songs to cheer up the other accident victims while smoking his last cigarette and died. In 1946, shortly after the end of the war, brothels were outlawed in France. However, the French Foreign Legions continued to use mobile brothels until the late 1990s. Carbone is believed to have single-handedly engineered the proliferation of prostitution in France in the early 20th century, and was primarily responsible for the surge in heroin addiction in the United States in the mid-20th century. Some of the networks created by Carbone in the 1920s are still being used in the present day to traffic girls for sexual exploitation. Thank you for watching. If you have a video idea, why not leave a comment below? And if we make it, we'll give you a big shout out. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more videos on crime stories, notorious outlaws, and historical scandals.